Hello, my name's David Bryan, and this is Curiosity Invited, a podcast inspired by endless curiosity. Tune in for an open-minded conversation about interesting and important things. Okay, well, here we go. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to Curiosity Invited. My name's David Bryan, and today I have the great pleasure, through many shenanigans and schedule changes, of speaking with Scott Richards. And Scott Richards is sitting, I believe you're sitting in the workroom at the farm. Scott Richards is the owner of the Shoshone River Farms. And is that right? Shoshone River Farm?
Yes, sir.
And so would you tell us a little bit about what size farm, when did you start it, and why did you start? Like, where, do you come from a farming family? Like, is this, how'd you get to where you are right now?
Long and twisted story. So lots of family in ranching. Did a lot of great granddad, granddads, uncles, great uncles, guiding, hunting, and ranching, all sorts of things here in Wyoming. And the next generation, my dad's generation, realized how much work it was and how little pay it was, and didn't want to do any of that kind of stuff. Went to the big cities, worked in the big cities, and I was raised in the big city.
Oh, no kidding. So you weren't raised on a farm or a ranch or anything like that?
Well, sort of, until I was 6 years old or so. We were raised on a ranch just outside of Cody here.
Yeah.
Summers, I'd go down to the ranch and my granddad's ranch down in Medicine Bow, Shirley Basin area.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But generally speaking, lived in the big cities until I was about 40 and came back up here.
Well, what counts as a big city? Big city in Wyoming?
Denver. Spent some time in LA, some time in Sacramento, California.
Yeah, that's big city.
Austin, Texas.
Yeah, that counts. All those count for sure.
Yep.
I thought you were going to tell me the big city like Powell.
Right. Well, So
how'd that happen? So suddenly you're raised in the big city. Did you have a dream that you wanted to get back on the farm, or were you planning something else? And
the first time I started growing was in second grade in LA. I had the responsibility of the strawberry patch and just loved it. Really easy to grow in California.
Yeah.
By the time I was in Sacramento, I was like 14, 13 years old, something. I had the full responsibility of the garden. Moved to Denver and continued having the responsibility of the family garden. Kind of outgrew it pretty quick, but just never had any space to continue to grow beyond the backyard. So eventually, at some point, I came up here and had an opportunity to get the 5 acres here where the farm is, and just started expanding and growing.
Yeah. So I'm a city guy. I was born in New York City, raised there, moved around a bunch in that area, and actually lived in LA for a while, and then the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm not a farmer, although I love digging in the dirt. But 5 acres that's small, yeah? Is that
terrible small? Yeah, I kind of wish I had 20 or 30 acres. Even 100 acres would be kind of fun, but it's pretty pricey to own farmland nowadays.
Yeah. So 5 acres, you bought it when?
My parents bought it. They bought it in 2010. They were trying to support me. They knew that I was wanting to farm, do something, and this was the best option to get into the system. And so they bought this piece of property, and they allowed me to farm it.
That's fabulous. So you've been doing it since then, since 2010.
Correct.
That's great. And so I know about the Shoshone River Farm because of the CSA, right? So could you the community supported agriculture? Could you say something talk about that? Talk about what is it? And I know it's a big movement across the country, and
So it started in the 60s or 70s, I think, in Japan, and people, mostly moms, wanted a bunch of good fresh vegetables for their kids to be raised on because it wasn't being produced well, that even in the 60s. And so what they did is they went out to a farmer and said, grow these vegetables for us. And the CSA, they call it community supported agriculture even at that time, and they actually bought the vegetables from the farmer and they um, distributed amongst themselves. It's changed. The CSA model has changed tremendously since then. Um, it's now more farmer driven as opposed to consumer driven. So the farmer raises the vegetables and then tries to find the members that want to come in and buy the vegetables or buy a share of the farm.
So, so, so a bunch of people, so us, we buy a share of the output of the farm. Right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And it's not like we're going up there and ordering, okay, we want scallions, we want celery, we want whatever. It's you're growing what you think people want, what people want, and people buy a share, and then come pick up the vegetables every week.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And I mean, I will say, it's here's my puzzle. Why don't more people participate? Do you have a story about that? Like, I mean, well, maybe some people probably don't know about it, but if you are anywhere near Cody, Powell in Wyoming, and you've not heard of this, you should. But why don't, I mean, it doesn't seem, I mean, when I go to the grocery store and I look at the vegetables there, and then I compare them to what I get from our share every week over the summer, it doesn't seem like there's any comparison. I don't see why more people aren't buying shares and picking up their vegetables every week. I don't get it.
Well, so there's kind of, a couple things with the CSA. So the CSA, you're actually buying in to the farm a little bit, and you're becoming a partner with the farm. So that if there's a problem, we get a hail or something, the CSA member has taken some of the risk and they lose some of their share value.
Right.
If there's an accident, problem, whatever, but it helps to ensure that the farm continues on from year to year. So it's a community connection to the farm. So there is some risk. There's also an issue with coming out and having to pick up at the farm. It's like having a soccer game once a week. So that's kind of a disadvantage.
Right.
Some people also just really prefer to go to the farmers markets to pick up stuff. Even that they're paying a higher price, they're able to select exactly what they want, but they're also able to go to the other vendors and see what's available and maybe get other
So
things.
do you
So it's kind of a
do you
balance.
do you sell your vegetables or your whatever you grow at farmers markets as well?
I do.
You do.
We do.
And
So it's at a higher cost. So the CSA is getting their vegetables at a wholesale cost. And so they are pre-purchasing, but it's still since they're pre-purchasing, picking up,
right.
we can afford to do it at a wholesale.
Right.
So they're able to get a little bit better value.
And is the farm performing the way you'd like it to perform? Would you want more people in the CSA? Would you want more, well, you obviously want 20 acres or 30 acres or 100 acres, but
Right. So David, it's a real balancing act on, between wholesale and retail.
yeah,
You have to have the right amount. It's really convenient not having to go to farm, not having to take a whole bunch of vegetables to the farmer's market. You have to
I would
CSA come
imagine.
and pick it up.
Yeah.
We've got some other wholesale accounts that work really, really well that, we're all pre-sold, and, before we even harvest, we know what we have to harvest for, and it's already sold and it goes out the door and boom, it's gone. Farmers markets are a little fussy for us because we just kind of have to kind of wing it. We kind of, throw out some stuff, some numbers, for the first few weeks, and then kind of adjust them as the markets go on. Every year the market's different.
Yeah.
Even every week it seems like the markets have some variation. So those are kind of difficult to work with.
And you just mentioned other wholesale accounts. So who else do you sell to?
So we've got a couple of food hubs that we work with. One is in it's called Yellowstone Valley Food Hub. It's in Billings, Montana.
Yeah.
And then we also have Fresh Foods of Wyoming, which is in Casper. It's based in Casper. And so Casper comes up and picks up the Yellowstone Valley Food Hub. We actually ship on custom delivery and ships up there once a week, and they have their distribution up there on the same day.
Got it. So yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So and is it? So it's just you. It's 5 acres. It's obviously not just you doing everything. It would be even harder to get this Zoom going. But so how many people work on the farm?
So generally speaking, what I aim for is myself and 3 other full-time employees, and then a couple of sometimes kids come in that want to have their first job, and
Right.
or some college students that come in just part-time during the summer, or that sort of thing. But it's usually myself and 3 full-time people. Last summer I had myself, 1 full-time person, and 14 part-time people.
Oh wow.
Which was not ideal.
I was going to say that's a lot of juggling right there.
It was just not knowing who, there's so many people coming and going. It just got confusing. It's like, well, the beginning of the day it was like, well, who's here? It's like, okay, this is our staff today. So it's like, this is what we're going with.
And yeah. And is there a lot of training? Do you have to do people come in going like, okay, here I am, tell me what to do? I've never done this before, or
there's, it's a kind of a mix of people that know what to do or how to do it. A lot of people don't know how to just physically work. They're good at, mental stuff, being able to work on the computer and such, but to get out in the field and be in the hot sun and, pick, 100 bunches of carrots in, a short period of time, and be able to make those time frames, it's tough sometimes.
So
they just don't.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
They just don't know how to use, it's every time you move your hand or your arm in direction or whatever, you stand up or, whatever, it takes time. And if you're doing 100 times, you got to be able to learn how to reduce those numbers.
Yeah. No, I get it. How do you decide what to grow?
So initially it was whatever I could grow. So it was really tough soils here. It's really tough to grow in Wyoming.
Really?
I thought going from Sacramento, California to Denver, Colorado was tough. Going from Denver, Colorado to coming up here was a whole different system. The weather's tough. The soil is really rough up here.
What does that mean, really rough? What, like in what way? Chemically?
Well, we started out with pH 8.5. Alkalinity that was basically it's that white stuff that's on the ground when you're driving through the basin, you can see white stuff around. That's basically salt. And so it was high salinity, high pH. So
what do you do about that?
We're the methods I came into from I learned down in Denver and how to change the soil down there is a biointensive or biodynamic method. It's a really amazing method. We're not totally organic, so I can't call us biodynamic, but I call us biointensive. And so what I'm trying to do is create as much life in the soil as possible, because the life will actually change the pH in the soil, it'll change the salinity of the soil, it'll make everything ideal for itself. It'll change everything around, but you have to make it so there's plenty of food for all that life. So that the more diversity of life you have, the more diversity of food you have to have in the soil. So
what does that mean? Diversity, put life in the soil. Like what counts as life in the soil? Bacteria,
virus, funguses, molds, it goes on to so many things. There's a bunch of carbon cycles. When you start looking at carbon cycles in the soil, the more there's a tremendous amount of them that are exchanging uh, uh, atmospheric oxygen and atmospheric carbon dioxide, atmospheric nutrients, basically, and bring it into the soil, and the soil changing them and turning them into things. And there's this huge carbon cycles that are going on, and there's multiples. And uh, what's involved in there is energy, and energy is associated with food.
And okay, so you've been doing that on the farm for 13 years, roughly, right? Yeah.
Well, this will be our 15th year technically
15.
going to farmers market, but 14 years here at the farm. Yep.
And do you notice a big difference in what you're able to do now versus what you were able to do when you first got there in the salt mines, as it were?
Absolutely. We were able to grow, a few things, carrots and beets. Broccoli was horrible. We couldn't get ahead of broccoli. If I stood over it the whole, 60 days while it was growing, we had very low yields of everything, even the things we could grow. We had low yields. Now we're starting to get, when we plant a bed of carrots, almost all of them come up. If they don't all, and most of them, in fact, all of last year, all the carrots were coming up, all the beets were coming up. We're still having some issues.
Issues having to do with the soil, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
This biointensive method is a method of basically overwhelming the soil with compost and food, basically. Any kind of materials like straw, hay,
Yeah.
wood chips, anything you can do to get that carbon into the soil. And as you add it, it disturbs the whole balance of the soil. And it takes a few years for that to reestablish itself. But once it does, it's great. The whole method takes, if you have all of the nutrients, all the inputs, it takes 7 years. And years 2 through probably 5 are usually your most difficult. That you'll have things will be doing really great in a bed, and then all of a sudden they'll just not. You'll have a whole bunch of pests that'll just start arriving that you don't know how to deal with because there's a new ecozone for them. And then eventually it all settles down and it turns into a balanced method, your balanced system. And you have predators and you have pests and you have all the things that are sort of in balance, and you throw something in and it just grows.
When you grow, do you grow outside in the open air? But I mean, I know there's like, houses, like, I don't know what to call them. What are they called?
So there's high tunnels and we have greenhouses. So a greenhouse is a covered high tunnel, or a greenhouse that's heated, and then the high tunnel is unheated greenhouse. So it doesn't have any heat, but it's protected from the wind and the cold that is associated with early spring, late and fall.
Right.
So the high tunnels themselves, that's what we started out with, give us an extra 6 weeks in the spring and an extra 6 weeks in the fall. So that's a total of 12 weeks, which is 3 months of extra growing.
Yeah.
It kind of determines, that only cold tolerant vegetables can be grown in those tunnels, like the lettuces and spinach. There's a whole bunch of them: kale, choy, Napa cabbage, the cauliflower and broccolis, things like that. You can grow those in those because they're cold tolerant. They can go down into those 30 degrees without too much trouble. The tomatoes and peppers and things like that, basils, they see a little bit of chilliness and they're
done. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And do you grow anything outside, or everything grows within either a high tunnel or a greenhouse?
So we've got about a half an acre under cover, under plastic, and then we've got about 3.5 acres that are outside, and that's predominantly where we grow.
That's predominantly where we grow. Got it.
Right.
Got it.
So the greenhouses and the high tunnels allow us to get the early season crops and the late season crops.
Yeah.
So we're able, like last year, we delivered over 6 months worth of vegetables. That means when we were growing at least 8 months out of the year in northern Wyoming.
That's amazing, actually.
So
Because
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
very
anybody who
impressive,
doesn't know the weather here,
right?
let me just tell you, that's amazing.
And we have maybe 100 days. So what is that? A little bit more than 3 months of frost free.
Yeah, exactly. My fingers and toes will confirm that. Are you satisfied with the yield? Like, is it producing what you think it ought to be producing, or you still feel like it's, you're making the climb?
We're still changing our soils. We still have some issues and problems. We are still, fussing through. But we are like last year, we used less land last year than we did in previous years and produced more. So we have more to grow. It's just our markets have to grow.
Got it.
And so that's it's not just growing, David, it's also having a place to sell it.
Yeah,
And
no,
we're
exactly.
we're in northern Wyoming in a county that has what 20,000 or 30,000 people in it. If I was next to Denver or Austin or LA,
Yeah,
I would have every bit of a market that I could possibly grow to.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's so we're slowly growing here, but we're getting there.
The other question that came to mind as well. So, if that's true, I mean, both the limits and the size of the market, the limits on what you can grow, how long you can grow, and the size of the market. How come you decided to put it in Wyoming?
It's a very good question.
Or you're
So
you're asking
it,
yourself that question every day?
well, not. I mean, I know the answer. It's because my family was here. So I'm a caretaker to my dad and such. They were getting into their late 70s when they
Yeah,
bought the property, and I knew that I needed to be around them.
sure.
So this is where they were wanting to be. Dad wasn't going to go anywhere else. So
Yeah,
um,
got it.
so this was it.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned before, so like you can't call it organic. Do you want to call it like? Would you like to get that sort of? I guess it's a certification or a.
So
Is there an advantage other than market advantage? I guess.
the current sense of organic has been really, sorry for the word, bastardized by the U.S. government and by corporate America. Um, it doesn't mean what it used to mean. I could probably go get certification right now for organic certification because mostly we use our our fertilizer. It's a urea that we use. It's a high strength nitrogen fertilizer. Then we pretty much use it only in our compost piles. Every once in a while, it has to get into the farm a little bit, but that's getting less and less, much less so. Um, but we'd still qualify because we're just using it in the compost pile. It's being turned and such things. I don't believe that's the real intent of what organic meant. Organic was a sense of sustainable, even to the fact that you were using natural inputs and you were really working on being having a balanced approach into your growing, so that you weren't going out there and killing a bunch of stuff and a bunch of insects and such, but you actually are living with everything. And that's not what organic is. The classic organic is anymore.
Hmm,
Classic organic is you've got a whole bunch of pesticides that you can use
really?
to do killing. Yeah, they're organic. There's like soaps and neem oils and a bunch of things like that. You know, there's no balance in any of that. Once you
I
start
understand.
doing killing, you're doing broad-based killing. You're killing your predators. You're killing your pests as well. Instead of having a good
So,
balance of
right,
things where
a
everything.
bio balanced, right?
Right. That everybody's alive and everybody's there, but there's no big
Right.
outbreaks of aphids, there's no big outbreaks of, any particular thing that's killing anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. And did you watch that change over the years, or
I've seen it when I was down in Denver, when I was doing the backyard garden. I found this method, the biodynamic method, started going with it and started learning more and more about the balanced approach. And I just down there because I had so much access to resources, leaves and wood chips and such. I was able to overwhelm this. We had about a quarter acre, which is still a pretty good size.
Yeah.
I was able to overwhelm it with carbon and nutrients and such that uh, everybody was so happy that there was a few aphids here and there, but there wasn't. But there was lots of ladybugs, and there was lots of predators and spiders, and everything was around, and I never had any problems. And the plants, I mean, people would come into that yard and they'd want to eat everything that was there. It was just so attractive to them. It's like, oh my God, you've got to give me some of that stuff, whatever it was, just because it just looked dynamic, full of life, and something that was, I don't know, fat, fat and happy.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So I've seen this method work before. When I came here, I was really excited about trying it. I didn't understand how short the supplies and the
Yeah.
resources were here. Um, but I've been able to find, through over years, been able to work at trying to develop, uh, getting those resources. Mostly I have to pay for them, which
Oh,
is
really?
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we're buying, I have to buy like corn stalks and hay, which is, or that's raised conventionally. So it's going to have contamination on it with Roundup, and
Right.
there's real possibilities for other contaminations to come in. But hopefully, I ask all the right questions, and people tell me honestly and are forthright with what they're putting on everything. And then we just take that materials, grind it up, and compost it. So we're always trying new ways.
We were just so blown away by the quality of the vegetables we were picking up every week. It was like, oh my God, I feel like I died and went to heaven. And it looked so good and it tasted so good and was, just amazing. And I'm wondering if the farmers around have that same value that you do for that and are sort of trying to move in that direction, or are you one of just a trickle of farmers who that's what you're paying attention to?
So the conventional farmers that are out there that are growing beans and beets and barley and corn and such, there is no very there is maybe a hint of people becoming aware of the fact that they need to work with their soils. There are a few people like the George family farms, and there's some others that I've been come in contact with a little bit, that are at least trying to do some um, um, minimal tillage on their soils, and trying to put in, their manures and other things like that back on their farms.
Hmm.
The majority of the conventional farmers have very little understanding of their soil or what it means. It's a medium where they they throw in nutrients and their seeds, and they harvest from. It's not something that I would say they respect or have any interest in developing or understanding. Now, there's a few small farmers, small vegetable farmers, that I think are much more sensitive and aware of the fact that if they're going to get the level of production of vegetables that they need, they have to change their soils. Just putting in the standard, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in the soil, and giving it some water and crossing your fingers isn't going to give you high enough production in Wyoming to make a go with growing.
Mm.
We know the methods that we're using, and we just test just to make sure we're on the same. We're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
There's some tests that I'd like to do. There's some just some chemical assays that would be handy to do, some GC or GCMS tests, just to see what kind of
What does that mean?
pesticides.
GCMS. What is that?
GC is gas chromatograph, and MS is a mass spec. So there was in a previous life, I was a chemist. So I had the opportunity to do a bunch of testing and such. It was mostly for oil and gas contamination.
Yeah.
But we picked up pesticides and did pesticide contamination as well. And I'd love to be able to afford to do some of those tests to see exactly how much contamination I'm getting from importing some of these conventional
Yeah.
resources or such.
And can you do anything about like, so, let's say you get corn husks and there's Roundup in it. Like,
So I don't.
is there something you can use to sort of?
Not so Roundup I can work with. In fact, all of them I can work with. It's all about the life in the soil. So I know I'm getting contaminated, and what I'm trying to do is develop life in the soil that is able to recognize that those chemicals coming in and consume them and get them taken care of. So ideally, those chemicals go through a billion lives before they even, are released into to where the growing area of the farm is.
Yeah.
In the compost pile, they're broke down, they're turned into inert ingredients, which I like to believe is inert. So break it down into something that the plant can use in a good way, as opposed to bad. Certainly the funguses are really, really important. That's what we were hoping for, is a half and half fungal to bacteria dominated soil. So once again, it's all about life, and the life is what's going to consume everything. There are some really nasty herbicides out there, though, that are we got dosed with some. Is called Milestone, or their general term is aminopyralids. They say they have a half-life of 30 days, but they also you start talking to the extension agents, it's a 5 to 7 year commitment once you get it into your area. Yeah, and we got dosed in 2012. I bought 300 bales of straw. I asked if there was anything on the straw, if they did anything to it before I even purchased it, what kind of chemicals. And unfortunately, farmers just don't understand necessarily all. I learned at that point that I needed to have a written thing of everything that they're putting on it. Like, it's not available, then I don't buy it. And that generally reduces it down. But even then, some farmers forget that they put it on 3 or 4 years ago. And so it's still in the system.
So some of that stuff, once it's in, it's, easy to get in and hard to get out.
Right. So there's some things you can do. I mean, my whole idea is the biointensive method, and just trying to get life up that knows how to deal with any contaminants that are coming in. I've seen it before.
Is most of your understanding of that comes from reading in books, or is there a community of people around that I don't know what you get together and you talk about biodynamics, but whatever.
I haven't necessarily found a particular community. A lot of YouTube videos and lots of information about it out there. There's schools for the biodynamic system and method that you can go to.
Yeah,
it's a fairly new process, and people are just, I think most of the world are just becoming aware of the fact of how important our soils are.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. I mean, I only know it from reading it, but it's so. You can tell just moving from one place to the next. It's like, I lived in LA for years, and it's like you do what you can. I lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains. All I had to do is stick something in the ground; it just grew.
So in Sacramento, we just threw the seeds in the ground damn near, and we had tomato plants that were 8-10 feet high, and we staked them the best we could, but more tomatoes off of 1 or 2 plants than I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Strawberry plants that just went crazy. Going to Denver was completely different.
Yeah, I bet that's right.
It was pretty frustrating the first few years until I finally found that method. I found that method about 4 years after moving there, 5 years, somewhere in there. And amazing method. Strongly encouraging.
Well, so before I let you go, because I know you're a busy guy. Do you have any goals for the farm that you see, Red? You're heading for that?
Yeah, so I'd like to, utilize this space as a place to teach a lot more people, trying to get people in here that could, come in and learn and, have a real stable staff of people, or I could afford
Yeah.
to pay them well enough that they could, actually afford to stay for a few more years than just, one or two. Um, I'd like to have the full property being in full use and, selling to as many markets as possible,
Yeah.
and I think that'd be great, having some facilities that are more stable, some wash facilities, that in, coolers and tractors that work for us and all that kind of stuff. The farm is a needy place, and you do what you can with what you have, and
Yeah.
you wish for more so you could do more with what you.
Well, if I knew what I was talking about, what would I ask you that I haven't?
Well, we could go in a little bit into the tunnels, a little bit about the greenhouses. There's all sorts of things to talk about with timing of uh, vegetables, trying to make sure that you get things timed so you have continuous amounts of vegetables.
Celery happened every time we were there. There was always cabbage. There was always celery. Does that mean you're planting some this week, some the next week, some the next week, or
It's a little bit like that. So, like carrots and beets, we try to do every 2 weeks. Lettuce every 2 weeks. Radishes every week. Um, Celery is once a month, somewhere in there. Um, it's a slow grower, and um, it does hold in position pretty well. Whereas a
yeah?
radish, you have days with a
I was
radish
about to
before
say
it's
if
gone.
it's ready, it's ready. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Do the greenhouses and the high tunnels, it makes growing, it sort of changes the environment so growing is possible sooner. Does it make it trickier in some ways?
It's a whole different way of doing things, David. I thought it was just going to be like outside, but better, and it is. But it's really easy to kill everything with too much heat. You got to be able to vent things pretty easily, and
Hmm.
that's the biggest issue. Knowing what you're planting when, because there's light issues. I mean, you can plant. It's like people say, "Why don't you grow all year round?" Well, we just don't have enough light. We're too far north. But by the cross quarters, I've learned about cross quarters. That February 2nd is a cross quarter. It's the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And at that point, I can start growing because I have enough light. There's just so many little things like that. You have a lot more pest issues, like grasshoppers like to overwinter in the greenhouses.
Really?
And so then the first thing that comes out, when you start growing stuff,
They're hungry.
they're hungry and they see all those nice, luscious little green starts and they just mow them to the ground.
That's how I feel about that.
I've been lucky that we've had some. I'm not sure they're little blackbird. I think they're a starling, but they would nest, and then they'd have like two or three groups of babies, and they'd kick their babies out of the nest, and they weren't quite there to be able to fly, but they could kind of hop and kind of fly, and they found their way into our greenhouses. And I wasn't sure it was a good thing, but it wasn't. What a couple days, I figured out that they were eating grasshoppers and having a great time. So once again, that sense of balance and things, and it worked out just great. That it gave them some early food and saw to it that they were able to do really well. And we have them year after year. Though the high tunnels and the greenhouses are just something you just have to learn how to grow. It's not something.
It's like a new thing. It's a different thing.
Straightforward. Yep.
That's interesting.
So,
and the same thing with the soil. It's like you don't have to make the soil different in there, do you, or do you?
Nope.
No.
Yes, yeah, I garden. I do the soil conditions in there the same way I do outside. So we're getting. It's a little easier for life in there, so that I think we probably have a little bit better diversity of life in the tunnels than we do outside. But they're farmed the same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott, when do you start? When do you start trolling for share buyers for the summer?
So I'm trying to kind of dragging my feet this year. I'm a little concerned because I'm not finding any help. And if I don't find help, I think the CSA is going to be one of the first things that's going to go away.
Really?
Because it's all pre-sold. And that's kind of concerning to me is if you pre-sale a whole bunch of stuff, that's kind of that's a 20-week commitment for delivering vegetables. And I bet I have 15 crops that are going in 2 weeks, and I don't have anybody to help me put them in. But in any case, I got to start working on that, and it's a little concerning that I don't have. I usually have at least one person at this point by the 1st of March, and
one person working full time,
and then by the 1st of April, another 2 people on. And right now, I've got probably 20 applications, and they're either from 14-year-olds that want to start this summer, or from people that want to work 1 day a week or part-time here and there. And I
yeah,
I don't think I can do it that way. At least it's a fascinating process of, finding customers and finding employees and, managing the crops and managing markets and all that, trying to put all the, I have to have lots of different hats on. And
it's super intensive, time intensive.
It is. And it's becoming the point where, I can see where I'm going to have to really step back from the farm and need a full-time manager just on, to do the other work. I can jump in and help, but I'm not much help when, I get a phone call and it takes me, 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, and then it's, trying to get back to wherever I was. And that's just not handy.
You feel like the birds are picking at your flesh. Right?
Yes, there is some sense of that. Yes.
Yeah.
Everything. That's another thing, David, I have to deal with is inflation. How do I deal with wages and such with people? And 3 years ago we started out with $10 an hour, and now I'm probably going to have to do 16 an hour just to get somebody in the door. That's not even management quality. That's just somebody in the door. Yeah, it's an interesting world we're moving into. It's hard to say where it's going to go. I think that the things like the farm here, having communities become more sustainable is going to be really, really important. Being able to generate your own food. Larry French went in front of Park County and said that we need to do some storage. They've got $12 million that they've got to spend of stimulus money, and they've got to get it spent before the next couple of years or something. And Larry said, let's put some storage, some grain bins in. Let's do some stuff that actually can make this community more stable. There's some real big problems coming with agriculture, let alone the rest of the world, right? There's problems with agriculture because there's not enough phosphorus, there's not enough potassium, and there's not enough nitrogen, and it's all getting higher and higher costs. And so it's going to squeeze out the countries that can't afford, right? Once again, it's going to be those that have and those that don't have, right? I can afford to go out. I don't want to, but I have to, right? I have to still have it. So I'll go down to Simplot and buy it. I can buy it. But the people in Africa or in India, they won't be able to afford it. It's not going to be an option for them.
No, the impact of all that stuff is always going to hit the people without the resources most.
Right. And so, we're setting up a unsustainable society, world.
Like what you said, like so many people are promoting and pushing for things that actually are against their own interests.
That's correct. That's the best way to say it.
What is going on? Why are you doing that? Well, Scott, I hope the CSA happens. I hope things go. I hope you keep getting to do what you do. It sounds like you love it as much as you hate it, but it's lovely that you're doing it because you love that bringing life, which is phenomenal.
I've always loved doing it. The family always discouraged me from doing it. They kept saying, go to college. So I did. So you don't want to be a farmer. You don't want to do any of that stuff. And so you're not going to make any money. They were right. I wasn't going to make any money. But I just love I just love the growing. I just love the challenge. I mean, it's challenging up here. and I'm working through the different aspects, just the market, the markets themselves were a challenge, let
Mhm.
alone trying to grow and such. So it's all been a challenge. So that's a good thing for me. I like challenges. So that was good. It's
Well, you
just
took one on, man.
I
You
did.
got one.
Just, I'd like to have it kind of settle down, and have it kind of get a little easier. I'm getting a little older now, so
Yeah, we all are.
so
Yeah, this hair was not always this color.
that's well. At least you still have your hair.
I do. I do. All right, man. You take care.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, David.
Thank you.